Peace and love, you beautiful miracles of spiritual level of being. Nathan here from a spiritual level of being, and you have a spiritual level of being. And today we're going to be discussing the removal of Mary Magdalene. Now, Mary Magdalene was one of the most important women in Christianity, yet in the Bible she has a limited role. In Gnosticism we have a Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and according to this she was one of the main disciples of Jesus. Now, not just this, but she was also considered a rival to Peter, as some scholars agree that Peter may have come from a zealot Jewish community and didn't like the fact that a woman was his equal. Now, this is due to the roles of Asherah worship. This was eventually stamped out as Asherah worship, goddess worship, had high roles with females as priestesses. So this was stamped out into later Judaism. Now, Yeshua, Jesus, was aiming to bring back equality. So the other disciples who came from different Jewish communities, possibly Zealots, Pharisee or Sadducee, and even Essene communities. Now the Essenes, of which were less stricter, but also more stricter in the same time. Less stricter towards women, but more stricter in roles of fasting. Now, not just this, but stricter in diet. Now, this is because the Essenes were vegetarian. So now let's move on. Now, Mary Magdalene was the first to see the risen Jesus. Without Mary Magdalene, it's argued that there might not have been a Christianity. So Mary Magdalene being considered one of the main disciples in Gnosticism. Now, the reason for the big removal of Mary Magdalene is because people were worshipping her, even worshipping her as a Christ, as the wife of Jesus, or as Sophia in human form. Now, Jewish women had roles of plant medicine and weaving. Again, going back to the Asherah worship. So it's even possible that these women were ones that healed Jesus if you go into the swing theory of him surviving the crucifixion with their roles of medicine. Now, we see in the Gospel of Thomas and even in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that Peter was jealous of Mary Magdalene. So we have a lot of removal here. The Catholic Church even tried to declare her a prostitute and then later apologized because the woman who was a prostitute isn't even named. Now, it said that Mary was cleansed of sins by Jesus. But again, this could be a way of removing her role. Now, Mary Magdalene has many different legends, from her having long hair, being out in the wilderness, being naked, covered by her long hair, to a story of her with eggs. Now, the egg itself represents reincarnation, life, death, rebirth, the resurrection, which in turn formed in Easter. Now, again, this comes from pagan elements. Now, I don't like using the word pagan, really, because it was just given to anyone that basically wasn't a Christian. Now, the Hermetic knowledge was definitely passed on through Christianity in the form of Gnosticism. Now, Gnosis, the word, was mentioned in the Bible. Sophia, wisdom. Now, this being said, the word for wisdom in the Jewish tradition is chokmah. Now, Mary Magdalene, who was also viewed as Sophia, as the bridegroom of Christ, so being the main disciple, as it's possible that out of the followers of Jesus, the women understood Jesus a bit more than, say, the male communities. Now, again, because the Jewish people stamped out the goddess worship, a lot of their traditions still would have passed on through oral tradition, though being mostly controlled by the male ruling classes. Now, we even had statues of Mary Magdalene, and because Mary Magdalene was being worshipped, these statues would be replaced by the Virgin Mary. So titles that were given to Mary Magdalene were in exchange referred to the Mother Mary. In some cases they referred Mary Magdalene as the Virgin. Now, even the Virgin and the Harlot, meaning Sophia. So the femininity version of Christ, so Christ being universal. So the Son of Man being within you. Now, man also being meaning mankind. So, again, the Christ being within you, achieve it for yourself. So, a few of the disciples could understand Jesus, though most of them couldn't understand him directly. If you go by Gnostic traditions, it was Thomas and Mary Magdalene that mostly understood him. Now, even his brother James, who Jesus told to seek out, was a bit stricter. Now, this being said, we had many branches of Christianity, and these branches really formed after his death. See, the historical Jesus wasn't actually out to start a new religion, rather to embrace a universal path, a spiritual path. Now, Mary Magdalene, who understood this, would ultimately be carrying out his message. Now, in the Gospel of Thomas, it mentions that Peter is getting jealous of Mary, saying that, why is a woman here in this presence amongst us, to Jesus? And in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, you see her being basically verbally abused by Peter. Now, one of the other disciples saying that if Jesus made her worthy, who will be the judge? So there's even stories of Mary Magdalene being the wife of Jesus. So we have this tradition that is ancient and even new, that is still carrying on even today. Now, Mary Magdalene, definitely a beautiful figure. So as I said, without her, there most likely wouldn't be a Christianity. Without Jesus, there definitely wouldn't be either. But Mary Magdalene was even referred to being kissed on the lips by Jesus, so that he loved her. The other disciples were jealous that Jesus loved her more. So we have this idea of equality that the other followers of Jesus didn't like, and say if they belong to the Zealot and Pharisee or Sadducee communities of Judaism, this is why. Where the Essenes were more equal, that women could be leaders as well as men. Though you had to be circumcised, you had to be a Jew first, and you had to fast out in the wilderness for 30 days before you'd be accepted amongst their community. They wouldn't drink alcohol. They would drink grape juice. They wouldn't even eat bread outside of a Sabbath. So they had their own particular type of manna bread. And it's argued that this manna bread was the invention of the Essene Jewish community, who were one of the major factions of Judaism. There's stories of Mary Magdalene being involved with the Asherah worship cults, or even Ishtar. Now, there are others that state that she was married beforehand. Later, because the Catholic Church declared her a prostitute, this was later on carried on in oral tradition as well. So traditions forming, becoming new. Now, we have other works, but it's even argued by scholars some of these works could be forgeries. Now, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that we have is a copy of an even older text. And that in turn could even be a copy of an even older one. So it's unfortunate because of these book burnings due to the Roman Church and the Catholic and Orthodox Church later, that most of these writings were destroyed. Now, another huge reason why the removal of Mary Magdalene was done on purpose was because she was being worshipped as a goddess. So to change the titles into Mary was to remove the goddess, Sophia as well, from Christianity, and in turn give it to a title form of Mary still being the mother of God. So to stamp out these other groups of Christian beliefs. So instead, forming different pagan myths into their said religion, and this was due to the Romans, especially during the Council of Nicaea and the other councils after that as well. So we had a carry-on of oral traditions of choosing what was considered canon. Now, the ones who chose what was considered canon were all male-orientated. So we have Paul's work being contradictory. So we have Paul praising women and other texts basically demoting them. So Paul's highly sexist. Now, again, this was really a cover-up to remove the role of not just Mary Magdalene, but to remove the role of women, to make it more male-dominated, as the Romans and even the Sadducee and Pharisee and Zealot Jews were male-dominated. So we had later a sort of network exchange between the Greeks and Romans and the Jewish people when making the so-called Bible. So peace and love, everyone. I love you all. Connect to all my mind and soul. Namaste.